When Bob told me, "I'm never going to pay you and there's nothing you can do about it," I smiled. Because what I did next cost him everything: his business, his house, and his name. And it was completely legal. This is a true story from the early 2000s, from a freelance web developer called Mark. Mark was an SEO expert who knew how to dominate Google search results, a skill that would become a weapon. What makes this story special is that Mark didn't just get his money back. He systematically destroyed his client's business over the course of a year using nothing but 2 domain names and some brilliant SEO strategy. Before we get into it, subscribe to Karma Chronicles because I post stories like this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Trust me, you won't want to miss what Mark did to Bob. Back in the early 2000s, Mark was a freelance front-end developer and search engine optimization expert. This was when getting on the front page of Google was actually pretty simple if you knew what you were doing. Mark had a secret weapon: a single website with serious page rank clout because it was linked directly from one of the most trusted websites in the world. He would use this site for his best clients to make their websites leapfrog older, more established competitors in search rankings. One day, Mark was approached by a guy we'll call Bob. Bob sold travel packages and needed a complete website overhaul. He wanted something complex: fancy back-end coding, e-commerce functionality, the works. Mark could handle the front end, but he had to hire a back-end developer for the complicated stuff. Bob had a major launch in 1 month, and the website absolutely had to be ready. Now, Mark usually asks for a 25% deposit up front, but Bob refused. He said he'd been burned by a previous developer and wasn't going to lose any more money. He promised to pay in full before the site went live on his server. Here's the thing. From the moment Mark met Bob, his gut told him this would end badly. But Mark needed the money. It was a substantial project, worth a lot to both him and the back-end developer he'd hired. Against his better judgment, Mark agreed to skip the deposit. For an entire month, Mark and his developer worked day and night, sometimes pulling all-nighters to meet Bob's deadline. With just 1 day to spare, they finished it. Mark had never been so proud of what they'd created. He was genuinely excited to show Bob. He had no idea what was coming. The next day, Mark sent Bob the link to the test server. Bob called to discuss it. He said everything looked good, but he was worried his server's PHP version might be too old to run the website. Mark assured him it would work fine, but Bob insisted. He said he was too scared it wouldn't work, and he wanted to test it on his own server before paying a single penny. Mark and the back-end developer didn't like it. Every instinct was screaming this was a bad idea, but Bob was adamant. Upload the site to his server for testing, or he walks away. Reluctantly, they agreed. Bob gave Jack the FTP login details and server credentials. Mark uploaded everything. The website was live on Bob's server. Mark sent Bob an email confirming everything was ready. And then, nothing. Silence. Mark sent several more emails. No response. He started calling. Every call went straight to voicemail. Sensing a major problem, Mark rushed to his computer and fired up his FTP program to delete their work from Bob's server. Access denied. Bob had locked them out. The following day, Bob went live with the website. The website Mark and his developer had spent a month building for free. For several days, Mark kept trying to reach Bob. Phone calls, emails, nothing. Then one morning, Bob answered, and what Bob said next would be a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. "Listen," Bob said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I'm never going to pay you, and there's nothing you can do about it." Then Bob hung up. Mark sat there shaking, phone still in his hand. Rage doesn't even begin to describe what he felt. But as Mark sat there, cycling through every expletive he could think of, something clicked. Revenge would be his. Mark realized something Bob didn't understand. Bob might have stolen the website, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. Mark wasn't just a developer, He was an SEO expert with access to one of the most powerful ranking tools on the internet. That secret website Mark owned, the one with massive page rank from being linked to one of the world's top sites, that was a weapon. And Mark was about to use it. Here's what Mark did. First, he registered a new domain name. If Bob's website was bobstravel.com, Mark registered bobstravelsucks.com. Then he uploaded their entire work, basically an exact mirror of Bob's live website, onto this new Sucks domain. Next came the genius part. Mark used his ultra-powerful PageRank website to link directly to bobstravelsucks.com. In the world of early 2000s SEO, this was like dropping a nuclear bomb. That single link from a trusted high-authority site gave Mark's new domain instant credibility in Google's eyes. But Mark wasn't done. He registered a second domain, Bob's full name plus sucks at the end. So if Bob's name was Bob Henderson, Mark registered bobhendersonsucks.com. On this second website, Mark posted the entire story, what Bob had done, screenshots of emails, warnings to other potential clients about what a con artist Bob was. Then Mark linked to both sites from his powerful domain and waited. Within 1 month, both of Mark's websites ranked above Bob's actual business website for every single search term related to travel packages Bob sold. No matter what you typed into Google, Bob's company name, travel packages, Bob's personal name, Mark's Sucks websites appeared first. Bob's site was always below them. For the first few months, Mark basically forgot about it. He'd done his part. The websites were up, ranking #1, and there was nothing Bob could do about it. Then, about 4 months later, Mark received a cease and desist email from a law firm. Mark looked up the firm. It didn't exist. Bob had made it up. Mark replied with Bob's exact words, "I'm never going to take them down and there's nothing you can do about it." That's when things got interesting. Mark started receiving emails from people Bob had scammed, customers who had paid for travel packages that Bob never actually booked. They'd found Mark's website and wanted to share their stories. Mark added every single complaint to both of his websites, making sure Bob's company name and full name were plastered across each review. Every new complaint was fresh content, and Google loved it. Mark's websites became more and more dominant. A few months later, Mark received an anonymous email with a link to a new website, marknamesucks.com. The email said if Mark took down his 2 sites, Bob would remove this one. Mark checked. The site wasn't even indexed on Google. Nobody could find it. For the second time, Mark replied with Bob's own words. More months passed. More victims contacted Mark. More complaints went up. Then something big happened. Turns out the travel industry is heavily regulated. The Travel Agency Association started an investigation into Bob's company, and they were using Mark's websites as their primary source of evidence. One day, Mark's phone rang. It was Bob. Bob was not a happy man. In fact, Bob was desperate. You could hear it in his voice, the desperation, the panic, the resentment. Bob literally begged Mark to take the sites down. He wasn't being investigated just by the Travel Association anymore. Apparently, Bob had some very important friends who didn't appreciate the bad press he was bringing to their circles. Bob offered to pay the money he owed. Nothing more, just what he originally owed. And Mark, with the biggest smile on his face, said for the 3rd time, "Listen, I'm never taking them down, and there's nothing you can do about it." Then Mark hung up. Bob must have lost his mind when he heard his own words thrown back at him. Roll forward a few months. Mark discovered that Bob's travel company had been removed from all major travel associations. No matter what anyone typed into Google, Mark's websites outranked Bob's. Every potential customer saw the bad reviews first, right on page 1. Mark had crippled Bob's business so badly that it went bankrupt. During the collapse, one of Bob's former employees contacted Mark and told him something fascinating. Bob had worked desperately to get Mark's websites off the first page of Google. He'd registered dozens and dozens of domains, hoping some would rank above Mark's sites. What Bob didn't know was that only the top dozen websites in the world had enough authority to outrank Mark's domain. Bob never had a chance. But the destruction didn't stop at the business. Bob's property was tied into loans against the failing company. When the business went under, Bob lost his house too. It took Mark exactly 1 year to turn Bob's business from a cash cow into a dead cow, all because of 2 domain names and some brilliant SEO strategy. Years later, when Bob offered to pay the original amount owed, Mark didn't take it. By that point, it wasn't about the money anymore. Bob thought he could buy his way out after pretending to be a lawyer and trying to intimidate Mark. Mark wanted Bob to know that the money didn't matter anymore, and that must have driven Bob insane because money was all Bob cared about. Bob had to sit there and watch his entire empire crumble, knowing there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. Today, those websites are probably still up, still ranking, still warning people about Bob. Mark got his revenge in the most perfect way possible, completely legal, utterly devastating, and using the exact skills Bob had tried to steal. Bob learned the hard way that you don't mess with a developer who understands how the internet works, especially one who controls a website that Google trusts more than almost anything else online. Mark's business continued to thrive. Bob's empire turned to ash, and every time Mark thought about it, he remembered Bob's words. "There's nothing you can do about it." Turns out there was plenty Mark could do about it. The moral of the story? If you ever think about messing with a developer, don't. So what do you think? Was Mark's revenge justified? Or should he have just taken the money when Bob finally offered? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear about the entitled bride who got arrested at her own wedding reception, subscribe to Karma Chronicles, because that's the story I'm covering next week. I'm Karma Chronicles, and remember, what goes around comes around.